Why do you feel that being able to communicate and ask for what you want in bed is so important to gay men?
What we have to start with, I think, is the premise, this idea that somehow sex is not something that's worthwhile, that asking for sex, prioritizing sex is something that maybe is a little shameful. I don't know about you, but I find sex to be probably one of the pinnacle kind of ecstatic moments of being a human being. And the more of that you can cultivate in your life, more of that you can have in a healthy way, I think just makes life so much more exciting and worthwhile, and that there's no real shame in that desire.
And that's such an important point, because for so long, and in particular in the past 40 years for gay men, our sex lives have been pathologized. They've been policed in many ways because of the epidemic. And we have this shameful relationship to gay sex in general that starts way before any introduction of disease. And to be able to prioritize pleasure and intimacy in whatever form, whether it's a long-term relationship or whether it's someone you met on the street, we've prioritized HIV prevention and health issues over pleasure and intimacy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I should say that the public health priorities are often seen as the only priorities that we should think about sex. I think good sex education is about trying to minimize risks, but I think if you don't balance that out with a message about how to maximize pleasure at the same time, you're left with kind of even more kind of shaming messages, kind of fear.
Well, and we have an entire history as gay men where we've had to determine which one is more important to us. And 40 years of living in an epidemic, many of us had decided that we're willing to live with whatever risks there might be because we've prioritized pleasure or because we've prioritized intimacy. Prior to the epidemic, we were having to mitigate risk in regards to how you meet men or risk to your job or your safety. All of those risks is something that in our community, we're quite familiar with.
Yeah. Shame compounds on shame, and it often becomes a vicious circle in which the idea of advocating for yourself in this way seems just risky.
Well, and so in terms of the topic of how to ask for what you want, I think part of the preliminary question is, how do you know what you want?
Yeah, that is a great question. The idea of knowing what you want is still hard. Find someone who can advocate, where you can safely talk about your every thought, desire, fear you have, and getting to know yourself in that way is probably the first step.
And that has been something that other gay men have served that function for many of us. We have friends or whomever that we feel like we can talk as openly as possible about all of our different sexual desires, even the ones that people might consider quote unquote taboo. What would you say are sort of some skills that people should cultivate to better communicate what they want?
If you're someone who came from like a very shaming, sex negative environment, you might be starting from a point where you aren't able to say something like, I don't like blowjob, or, these words. Literally just practice. Penis, 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 testicles, 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 testicles. Like write down every sexual act you could ever think of, even if you don't want to do it, if you do want to do it. And then maybe check off, I'm interested in this, I'm not interested in this. It's also taking the steps to make sure that you can listen to what someone wants non-judgmentally.
I just wanted to add that I think that we can create a space where we and our friends and people in our lives can feel open enough to have those conversations, whether it's over cocktails or coffee or brunch. No one should feel ashamed talking about what they want, or if they had gonorrhea or syphilis, and that it's just this sort of thing that we can speak openly and honestly about. One of the main things that has impacted those conversations, two main things, has been apps for connecting and dating and advancements in HIV.
Oh, for sure. I definitely think gay dating apps helps with that tiny little baby step you need. It's a little anonymous. You're able to write what you want around pleasure. I've definitely had a lot more discussions negotiating sex since downloading dating apps.
PrEP and Undetectable has radically transformed how gay men can communicate with each other in terms of what they want, in terms of whether or not they feel like they need to disclose an HIV status if they're undetectable, for example. PrEP in particular, I think, has allowed negative men to have a better and a different relationship to their sexuality and particularly when they've been afraid to talk openly about the sex without condoms.
I said it also by saying you're on PrEP, you're implicitly saying I get tested regularly, and I've definitely now been much more able to say, oh, when are you on PrEP? If you're not, when's the last time you've been tested? How many partners have you had since that last test? It's become so much more routine, which I think is just a positive.
And then if one is undetectable, it's impossible to transmit the virus. So all of those advancements have transformed how gay men interact with one another. For me, I put my HIV status that I'm positive in my profile. It avoids me having to sort of bring it up in conversation. It's out there. It makes it so much easier. But it also allows other people who are positive to see someone else or feel less stigmatized, because it allows us to make ourselves more visible. And I think that's the other part of communication is to be able to be open and
Oh,
unashamed.
for sure.
And
I mean, nothing makes me happier than when I turn on Grindr and I see someone with their full face, unashamed, just talking how they want to be fisted, talking how they want to be jizzed on. It can help people communicate more openly and honestly, for sure.